I have the authors of the book, The Anxiety Sisters Survival Guide, How You Can Become More Hopeful, Connected, and Happy. Yes, please. Yes, please. All right. The authors are Abbe Greenberg, MCIS, and Maggie Sarachek, MSW. They are trained counselors, mental health advocates, researchers, educators, writers, podcasters, and longtime anxiety sufferers. In 2017, they launched their online community, which now includes more than 200,000 people in more than 200 countries, okay, and territories. Together, the Anxiety Sisters write an award-winning blog and host a monthly podcast called The Spin Cycle. I will post that in the show notes at smbwell.com/192. They have learned to live happily with anxiety. They spend their time coaching anxiety sufferers, conducting workshops and retreats, and coming on shows like ours, the Love Your Life show, to bring this powerful message. Listen in. I loved talking to these warm souls, and I know you will too. All right, and welcome to the Love Your Life show, Abbe and Maggie. I am so thrilled to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, we're delighted to be here. Thank you for having us.
Very exciting. Can you let our listeners know a little, if they've been under a rock and they have not heard of the Anxiety Sisters, can you tell us how you two became to call yourself the Anxiety Sisters and what got you here on this journey, helping us all with our anxiety journey?
Well, we met in college, and Abbe likes to say we recognized the panic in each other's faces, even if we didn't have a name for it then. We became very close friends and stayed each other's friend and touchstone when we graduated college. And I would say that for both of us, we look back now and know we were having anxiety in college. We know we were having anxiety in high school and childhood, but didn't really have the name for it, didn't know sort of what exactly was going on. And I would say in our 20s, for me particularly, and Abbe too, in our 20s, the anxiety became more intense. And so we had our decade of what we call the IS, which we went to the acupuncturist, the neurologist, the psychiatrist, the hypnotist.
Don't forget past life regressionist.
Yes, the past life regressionist. That's right. Any IS that would take our money, basically. We were going to try to figure out what was going on, because anxiety is very physical. It's not like you always say, oh, I'm anxious, especially when you don't know yet what anxiety feels like. You don't know how to identify it. So, we both struggled so much. And what we found was we were really the person that each other relied on. We were sort of became a community of two, really. And we really were able to rely on each other and help each other and talk each other through things. And as we started to realize that we both were dealing with anxiety, we started doing a lot of research. Our own professional careers were unfolding at the same time. And I headed towards social work, and Abbe became a professor of communications. And so the personal and the sort of research piece with our careers came together. And Abbe, do you want to tell about the bus ride? Do you want to do the bus ride part?
Sure.
She's like, yeah.
So to make a very long story short, by the time we were in our early 40s, we had gotten a handle on it. I mean, people often ask, so you even though you went to all these ISs and everything, you didn't know you had anxiety. And the truth is that a lot of those ISs told us it was anxiety.
Oh, okay.
But like many other anxiety sufferers out there, we didn't really believe them. Because it didn't feel like what we thought anxiety would feel like, right? I'm not sure what we thought anxiety would feel like. Probably butterflies in your stomach, right? Or whatever, nervous something. We didn't think it would feel like, unending nausea. Or racing heart to the point of chest pains. Like that didn't seem to us to be intuitively what one would think of with anxiety. So even though there were people along the way helping us and telling therapists and doctors telling us you have anxiety, we sort of were like, yeah, don't you guys ever see House? You're missing something.
Right. Yeah. Come on.
So by
I
the
think I just need a thyroid medicine.
exactly, there's definitely something here you're not getting. So,
Right.
but by the time we started, really doing research in our fields and talking with a lot of folks who were also suffering from anxiety, we started to believe people that, wow, this could actually be anxiety. So that's kind of how we got from the panicked college arena and the agoraphobia and depression and difficulties that we experienced for the next 20 years to the place where we were able to say, oh, all right, we know how to manage this. We're going to save folks some time. But the bus story Maggie's referring to is that we were on our way from New Jersey to Manhattan, and we were talking rather loudly, as anxiety sisters are wont to do, about the side effects of our antidepressants. And the woman in the seat in front of us turned around and said, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I overheard you talking about that medication. I'm on that medication. I have the same side effects. What do you do about it? Before long, every woman on the bus, I mean, literally, I would say 75 to 80% of the bus had turned around and joined in this conversation.
Oh my goodness.
The things that were being shared were like medication, side effects, really intimate stories, personal details. And when we got off the bus, I said to Mags, can you believe how eager and willing people were to share this stuff with perfect strangers? Mags looked at me and she said, yeah, because anxiety is so isolating and so lonely and so scary. People want to connect with one another to know they're not alone.
Yes, that desperation.
Yeah. Looked up and said, we're anxiety sisters. And it stuck.
Oh, wow. Oh, I love that. I really do. A lot of what came out in your book and that has been very helpful for me as my own, experiencer of anxiety, and then also someone who coaches people with anxiety, is this whole idea of like, nothing's gone wrong here. Like, this is okay. This isn't something to fix, or like it is here. And that is something that you address in your book early on. You talk about how anxiety and happiness are sisters. And I would love, or friends, they go together. And I would love how you speak. Could you speak a little more to that? Like, how does happiness have anything to do with anxiety and vice versa in our society?
Well, we believe that our brand of happiness is anxious happinance. It's still perfectly great happiness. Mags and I are both really, for as much as anybody is happy, we're not dancing around every day, saying, wow, life's a dream. But, we're fulfilled and contented, and we make our own decisions about what we'll do, who we'll see, where we'll go. And when we were really addled by our anxiety, we were not able to do that. We were not able to decide where to go and who to see and what to do, because our anxiety was deciding that for us. It was too difficult for us. Mags couldn't leave her apartment for a really long time because of such severe phobias around transportation and elevators. My OCD got so out of control that I had to stay home so I could be hooked up to my computer and watch my heart rate. So we were in places at points in our 20s and early 30s where we couldn't be happy because we couldn't do anything. So our definition of happiness has three components. First, it's acceptance. So it's accepting who you are and what you've got going on in your life. I have not yet met a human being who doesn't have some form of condition, whether it be physical or whether it be a brain illness. I have never met anyone who's just completely sailing along on a problem-free sea with no family difficulties and no financial, there's just no such thing. So acceptance for us means, making do with what you've got the best you can, and instead of fighting everything so much.
That's the part that I just want to sort of put a pin in that right there, because that's the part where I feel that there's a lot of resistance. There's this this view of happiness that we should be happy all the friggin' time. And if we're not happy, well then God, something's wrong. And it's that acceptance in the happiness definition is what really resonates for me and has helped me a lot too, where it's like, I can have anxiety and I can have a wonderful life. And when I accept that, I'm much more able to be a good parent. You know, if my kid comes home with anxiety, I'm not like, danger, fix, must. It's like, right, this is part of the human experience. This is okay.
We all have challenges. There's not a human being out there that doesn't have a challenge. So we're all in the business of accepting what we have to deal with in our lives, and what's the best we can do with what we've got.
I really
And
like
our culture is all into the quick fix and all into the problem-free life, right? You know, I mean, we got great slogans like just do it, rise above the rest. I mean, everything is a big triumph in 3 easy steps, but we all know that, excuse my French, that's bullshit. That does not work in real life. That works on television and that works, you know, in fairy tales, but it does not work for real people. And the pressure that that societal view creates for all of us to be finding this happiness, this elusive thing that none of us have and we're searching for, it's sort of a big myth.
I mean, that's what gets me, is this idea that something's wrong if we're not happy, or that we will somehow reach a point where we will be happy and we have to work until that. And I just, you know, like to say life is 50-50.
Yes.
Like we're going to have, you know, 50% of uncomfortable emotions unless we're drugged out and comatose. Or, you know,
no judgment, been there, done that.
Right. But exactly. But it is that, like, if we're pushing ourselves and evolving and trying to be that, we're going to have uncomfortable feelings. So sometimes we're going to feel a little scared or nervous or
so anxious is human.
Right.
So happiness
I really
is
like
a
that.
three-pronged approach for us. It's acceptance, it's agency, meaning we're making the decisions, not anxiety. So for instance, people say to me, "Oh, are you cured?" No, I'm not cured. I'm an anxiety sister and I will be for life. So is Maggie. I wake up some mornings with terrible anxiety, but what I do is I say, well, fine, if you're here today, great, but you're not driving.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Keeping the control, and then finally connection, which saved me and Maggie.
Yeah, that you're not alone, that there's not somebody, I mean, as you speak to that bus incident of how nice it is to hear, like, oh my gosh, someone else has this symptom, or someone else is having this experience, or someone else is wakes up with anxiety there. That is really helpful, which leads right into my next question about, you speak of the anxiety catalog, which I love, and sort of a catalog of symptoms that show up with anxiety. And I would love for you to speak a little to the headbanger section, which so listeners have a clear idea of what they are, either or all of the catastrophizing, repetitive thinking, or the anxiety loop. Those really were 3 that I think my listeners would enjoy hearing more about.
Well, you know, Abby and I always say we have PhDs in catastrophizing. We would. But, you know, basically, you know, many of us, you know, have grown up either sort of with the idea the other shoe's going to drop or something terrible is going to happen. And we see, particularly for people, it could be around anything, but particularly around health issues or things we feel so out of control with, you know, so that something relatively small, whether it's health or something else, becomes this really enormous thing. And we project ahead to the future. Oh my God, this is going to be so terrible. And we all, we definitely, many of those things do not happen at all, right? So many of those things they're not something that happens at all. And when something really bad does happen, and it happens to all of us, we all have really bad things happen in our lives. We forget how much resilience we have, forget about our, you know, psychological our whole system of resilience that we have. But most of it is really spending all that time kind of imagining things that don't happen, which
like using your worry for that. It's like using your imagination for something awful instead of staying in the present.
And that's pretty closely goes near obsessive thinking for some of us. That becomes obsessive. You know, definitely there's obsessive thinking when you're very, very anxious. Often we start thinking the same thing. You know, we have one thought that goes over and over and over in our head. And it's like, it can really make you feel completely crazy when that's happening, because you can't get off that thought.
That's why we call them headbangers, because they make you want to bang your head against them.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the anxiety loop is really about, it's so awful to have anxiety or panic or be in that panic mode that all of us as human beings, we don't want to feel terrible. So we'll do anything we can to avoid feeling that again. But of course, the more we avoid, the more the panic rises. It's sort of counterintuitive at that point. So what we get really panicked about our next panic attack, say, really anxious about getting anxious, like saying, oh, I'm a little anxious today. And then I'm going to be so anxious today. That's
really right. Like it's the anxious about the anxious, or that's when I can catastrophize. It's like, I wake up, I'm like, oh, anxiety is present today. And then it's like, oh, this is going to ruin my day. And then
exactly, that's exactly it.
Right. Yeah.
And then for some of us, when the anxiety really feels out of control, we will say, and it's going to ruin my day today, so I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that, because it will bring on more anxiety. And that is really the beginning of a really serious loop, because then we start the avoidance behavior. So then the next time we go to do it, we're more anxious.
Yes, which I would love it if that was a perfect segue into, because that is one of the things that I really appreciated that you spoke of, is that sometimes when we're feeling anxious, we will take actions. And I think everyone has to get the book, because your sense of humor is like, with this topic, is it helps throughout the whole thing. But the illusionist and this idea that like, oh, this will make it better. If I'm afraid of going out to coffee, I will just never go out again. Or, what are some of those behaviors that our anxiety might tell us is a good idea, but creates that negative habit loop that I hear you speaking to?
That's true.
The illusionists those are like anger and irritability and things that we wouldn't necessarily attribute to anxiety. Like, in other words, like they're illusionists, because we don't immediately think that they would be an anxiety symptom.
Okay, I guess I heard you say like procrastination and napping were two there that I think you, or maybe I took that from different.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's sort of, I think that what you were, which I think it is a different type of illusionist, because what you're thinking about, I think, is like, there are these things that we think will help us with our anxiety. So we think, like if I'm afraid of driving on the highway, let me just take local roads. Like, let me avoid the thing that is creating my anxiety. Or there are also like these myths that people also perpetuate to us, like, oh, you're feeling anxious, you're not exercising hard enough, or you're not exercising enough. There's not that there's anything wrong with exercise, but there's all these things that we hear or things we tell ourselves. And a lot of it is not really helpful in dealing with the anxiety, because really, the more we avoid things, the more
it's going to be. Well, you're reminding me, yesterday I got an email. I'm trying to take a trip with my son, and it's COVID time, and I have to get this. It's an international trip, and the country has to give me this pass that says I can travel. And I got an email from them, and I saw it, and my first thought was like, I don't want to check it, because what if they say no? And then I moved away from my computer, and I was like, Susie, it's not going away. And then I know myself, and that's where I've gotten a little better with my anxiety, where I'm like, I know that will just be sort of a low hum in the background with whatever else I'm doing, while trying to distract from that, whereas all I'm thinking about. So I went back and checked the email, and I got the pass. Thank you very much. But even if I hadn't, I think that's what you're speaking to that resilience, that if I hadn't, then I still would have been out of that anxiety, because I would have been like, okay, now what? I need to, email them back or something. Whereas the not avoiding is.
Yeah, we want it. I mean, avoiding makes sense, right? Like, because we do not want to feel bad. And those of us who are in that panic loop do not want to get triggered. That is what we don't want to do. And, or if you have OCD, you're like, okay, if I just do this, you don't want to trigger yourself by saying, I'm not going to give in to the OCD. Like, that is just, setting yourself up to feel really awful. And it's sort of the ironic thing. And one of the hardest things we always have to explain to people is that even though it is bringing on your anxiety. Like we're not going to help you not feel anxiety doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You're gonna feel
unfortunately,
anxiety, or
you're
you're gonna,
gonna feel anxiety.
But
You know, we
there's
can,
things you can do to prepare for it so that you
yes,
can bring the intensity way, way down.
you can bring the intensity down and you can break it into pieces, but eventually you have to do the thing that makes you most anxious.
Yeah, well, I really enjoy your book because you speak in there about things that you can do to sort of prep yourself in terms of even more, but like, yes to vitamin B, no to excess sugar or alcohol or caffeine, so that we're sort of doing as much as we can behind the scenes to help us. You also speak of a spin kit. Could you explain what that is? Or prepping for anxiety comes up a lot in your.
I'm going to have Abby explain that, but I do have to say, in terms of the I just want to make sure your listeners are clear. We definitely give some causes of anxiety, and talk about vitamins, and we talk about not doing excess sugar, but in no way do we judge or tell you, like, don't do this or don't do that, because that was very hypocritical.
No, you're very accepting in the book, and it's just more to sort of this knowledge. Like I drink coffee, and I'm like, okay, I know that I have my coffee, and maybe that makes things, but I love my coffee, so there you go.
And we're totally into that. Like,
we're totally. And if I want 3 cups, I'm going to be more anxious. It's like
here's some things you can look at, but there are no shoulds here.
Yeah,
we definitely don't want to should on people because it's hard enough to have anxiety, and then to feel like you're also you're screwing something up, or you're not helping with your own treatment. I have to tell you, I've been trying to give up sugar for 54 years.
Yeah.
Ain't gonna happen.
Well, I really like that about your book, because it's like, if you want some options, here are some options.
Yes,
and you don't have, and even if you do all those things, you're still gonna have anxiety. So.
Yes.
Well, like what I think about the sugar instance, for example, is that, would I probably experience less anxiety if I were to get off of all sugar? I'm going to bet yes. I'll never know, because I'll never be able to do that. So in the real world, I make room for sugar in my life. I definitely moderate it, but I make room for it in my life, because the happiness I get from the sugar.
That's how I feel about caffeine. I freaking love my coffee. So.
Right, exactly. So we definitely are not prescriptive, because certainly when we were going to the bookstore looking for books to help us with our anxiety, we got a lot of the shoulding.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
A lot of prescriptive books out there telling you, and they weren't wrong. In other words, yes, we all know that it's healthier to eat less sugar. We know that. That's just a fact. But in the real world, it doesn't always work for everybody. So what we want to do is avoid any blame and shame, because that definitely makes anxiety worse. But about your question about the spin kit.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I love, giving people.
So it's, first of all, we call it a spin kit because when Mags and when our brains hear the word panic, they think it's a command. So we like to rename stuff, and we rename panic and anxiety with the term spinning, because we feel that it's a really good metaphor, first of all. And second of all, it feels a little more manageable to talk about it. Some people find themselves getting triggered just by the term panic attack. And I get it, because attack is a scary word. So we've gone with the spinning route. That's why our podcast is called The Spin Cycle, and our first aid kit for anxiety is called the Spin Kit. And just as you would carry an EpiPen if you have allergies, so would you carry a spin kit with you if you have anxiety. And in your spin kit, you'll have all kinds of things that are going to help you ride the wave of anxiety. Remember, we can't stop the anxiety. We can't eliminate it, but we can distract ourselves and soothe ourselves as we're going through it, because it will pass. And so we find things to keep us busy. For instance, like in my spin kit, I would have a fidget spinner, because I'll keep my fingers busy with that. And before I know it, the panic will start to subside. Or, Mags loves to crochet. So she'll always have some needlework with her in her spin kit wherever she is, so that if she starts to feel anxious, she can take out the needles. She doesn't have to concentrate too hard, but it's enough of a distraction, enough to keep her hands busy. It's a tactile experience, and that will help her ride the wave of the anxiety. And you can do that with sensory things, like with smells like lavender or bergamot, or anything that you
I was going to say, I carry some essential oil, and then a crystal that means something to me. So
that's a wonderful example of something you'd carry in your spin kit. And everybody's spin kit is different. Like in my spin kit, I have a couple of photos of my cats because when I look at pictures of them, it soothes me. If Mags were to look at photos of my cats, she would panic. So therefore, they're not in her spin kit.
That's perfect.
So everyone's spin kit is different, but here's the best part of the spin kit. Regardless of what you put into it, just the fact you're carrying one is going to mean that anxiety can't sneak up on you. And I would say 50% of the power of anxiety is its ability to shock you and make you say the following thing. Oh my God, why am I feeling this way? What's going on? If you're carrying a spin kit, you're going to say, oh, yeah, anxiety. Well, I have my spin kit.
Here it is. It's back to that acceptance and not fighting it and not getting into that anxiety loop. Well, I appreciate that. Could you speak a little to what is happening in the brain when, with the amygdala and everything that is happening in the brain when we feel the anxiety and how the spin kit helps there?
Well, anxiety, we love to call it a brain illness instead of a mental illness because anxiety disorder, particularly, because I think part of the blame and the shame that so many of us have is where exactly is a mental illness? It's sort of like out in the ether happening, like what does that mean? But we all know, but when we take a look at anxiety and we locate it in the brain, which is where it's happening, we have this amygdala, which is where our fight, flight, and freeze, it's our sort of emotional center. And we have that's part of the brain, and we can see on MRIs the brain light up when someone has anxiety disorder or when someone is extremely anxious. And so basically anxiety is sort of more of a brain malfunction. Well, anxiety disorder, I should say, because anxiety is completely healthy and normal, but anxiety disorder. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that tells us if we're in immediate danger. And in Anxiety Sisters, our amygdala tells the rest of our brain we're in immediate danger. It could be online in the supermarket. It could be in your bed. It could be, as you're picking up your kids from school, places where generally you're not in immediate danger. And so we have this sort of what we call a wonky amygdala. It's like it's very hyperactive. And the way our brain, the way we've developed through evolution is that, our primary job is keeping ourselves safe. When you think about, when we were living in caves and we always had to be on high alert. Was there, an animal that, a woolly mammoth coming out to eat us for dinner?
Right.
Yeah. What was happening? And we actually had to sort of balance our need to go out and get food with our need to stay safe. We needed to, but we always had to be on high alert because it was a very dangerous world we're living in. And our amygdala kind of never forgot that lesson. And so we get this sort of like intense anxiety or intense panic because our amygdala is telling us we're in danger even when we're not. And that is why the symptoms become so physical too, because our brain doesn't want us to say like, all right, it's anxiety, let me move on. Because we would all do that.
Like, yeah, it's a tiger. What are you talking about?
Exactly. We would all move on, So the way to get our attention is really to make us nauseous or give us rashes or, make it difficult to breathe or to swallow or any of the other things that anxiety can do. Because it's like, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention.
Well, that's where I wrote down a quote you had on page 116, where you say you're only 10 breaths away from reduced anxiety. And that just like, that seems so powerful. And I mean, that in itself, I want to put on a sticky note in my spin kit, because it is that ability, along with the brain's plasticity. It helps me a lot knowing what's happening, that yes, my brain is reacting as if there's that woolly mammoth, and then knowing how I can control this. So why do all the experts say, breathe?
I know, it's like people say, really? That's what you got? Breathing?
I know.
And we're like, yeah, let's tell you why. So we'll break it down really simply. Your nervous system has two responses. It has the sympathetic response and the parasympathetic response. And the easy way to remember it is that the sympathetic is S for stress and the parasympathetic is P for peace. So the stress response is what we feel when we're experiencing anxiety. That's that fight, flight, or freeze when you're feeling whatever symptoms you feel. Rapid heartbeat, dizziness, nausea, whatever it is that's your particular brand. The peace response is when your body can relax and digest. Okay, so your brain's in charge of these two responses. And your brain, if you have a wonky amygdala, like anxiety sufferers do, then you're going to spend a lot of time in that stressful sympathetic response with all the accompanying adrenaline and stress hormones and cortisol, etc. But the idea is to get back to that peace response, right? The quickest, cheapest way to get to the peace response is through the breath. And let me tell you why. If you're able to take a long, deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, that tells your brain, oh, we're not panting, we're not breathing heavily, we must not be in any danger. If we can take the time to have a nice deep breath, then we must be completely out of danger. And that signals your brain to make the switch. So you go from that stress response to the peace response, and then you can continue to breathe into it deeper, and your body gets there. And so, scientifically, that's the quickest way to get your body out of the fight or flight response, is to take deep breaths. Now, for some people, and not many, but for some, there's a hyperventilation issue that can happen. And so we do want to let people know that if you're one of those hyperventilators, then we have a different activity for you.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I was a hyperventilator.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little less so now because breathing is something you can practice when you're not in fight or flight and learn. But I was a major hyperventilator. So when people told me just breathe, it was not helpful, and that's something we always talk about in the book, which is not everything works for everybody, and not everything works for you every day or all the time. One size doesn't fit all. It may not fit you 2 days in a row, so that's why we have but definitely one of the techniques we have that we talk about a lot is breathing.
You have so many techniques in there.
Yes.
And I just really want to support your book. And I laugh because you say, like, when people told you to breathe, that didn't really work. But I feel like that's why I love your book, and I love conversing with you, and I love the community of the Anxiety Sisters. Because if someone tells me to, like, say I'm trying to watch what I'm eating, and someone's like, well, you should really stop eating that ice cream, then, like, I might react in the same way when they're like, well, you should really breathe. I'd be like, well, you should really mind your own business. but if it's coming from me and I know it, or I've read it with other people who are having similar experiences, it's much better received.
Well, that's like we always tell people when someone, it's like, please don't say relax to someone who's having anxiety.
Never in the history
of
calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. That's just
right. You're like, do you think I don't want to be calm?
Right, exactly.
I want to be.
It's actually kind of, if you think about it, it's shaming to tell someone to calm down, because it's insinuating that they have the control and that they can just simply turn it off. And I find that shaming.
I mean, I think that's a lot of how we get into this experience. I don't have an anxiety disorder, but I have anxiety. And I think a lot of that is because I had been taught over my years not to feel the smaller emotions building up, where it's like, oh, you shouldn't be worried about that. You shouldn't be scared. You shouldn't, like, all this shoulding on ourselves, where it's like, yeah, okay, you're feeling nervous. What are you going to do about that? Your feelings, like, and doing what you all preach. Could you, before we wrap up, could you explain the TLC technique? Because that is one that I really like and is usable. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be Abby's best friend because
okay.
herself.
I love it. Maggie doesn't love it as much as I do, but it works.
Yeah,
You know what it is? It's just, it works for me every single time. Like, even last night I was flying home on a very, very crowded flight, and I was feeling very spinny, very, very spinny. And, I had my spin kit and my TLC, and I was okay. And it doesn't fail me. So TLC, T, talk to yourself, L, loosen all constraints, C, cool down. So talking to yourself is my professional background. I'm a communication researcher and professor by trade. So I spent a lot of years researching how we talk to ourselves and how that shapes our experience that we then have, what we say to ourselves about it. Because the most important voice in your own head is your own. So you actually have a tremendous amount of power in what you say to yourself. So talk to yourself means find a mantra, find something soothing to say to yourself and say it out loud. So last night on the plane, what I said to myself was, I can breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe. I just kept saying it because what was going through my head was, I can't breathe. That was the panicky feeling, was that I had the mask on and I was around all these people and we were in this tiny plane, and that was scaring me. But I kept with my own voice and I was saying it kind of whispery, so it was almost out loud. I can breathe. It really helps.
Yeah.
Loosen all constraints. The first thing I did was take off my seatbelt. I know that's probably not so smart to do, but I knew I would eventually chill out and I could put my seatbelt back on. But anything binding you, when you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling constricted and your muscles are tense. So a belt or even a hair scrunchie or anything that's binding or jewelry, that when you release it, it's telling your body it can relax now. You don't have to worry about being tight. And then finally cool down. Anxiety generally revs us up and heats us up. Right? Heats up our body temperature, which is why for somebody who's prone to
hyperventilating we're raising it all.
Exactly. Or for someone who's prone to, let's say, panic attacks, why cardio is maybe not the best choice of exercise, because it's going to rev up the same muscles that get you into fight or flight in the first place. So cool down means get yourself nice and chilly, because that will again alert your brain. Oh, we don't have to worry about heat, so we must not be in fight or flight. We're in that sympathetic, we're in that parasympathetic peace response. We can relax. So suck on an ice cube. If you're in your car, roll down your windows or put the air conditioner on your face, a cooling towel on your neck. Any of those things. That's TLC.
Yeah, well, and I'm also thinking sometimes when I fly, I feel relief like taking off my shoes, which would be the L, I mean the C. And that, because you're loosening the constraint on your shoes and cooling down your feet. Or I've also had clients have luck, like you said, sucking on an ice cube, but even holding an ice cube, just sort of grabbing it and holding it. Yeah. And
putting it on your wrist.
And the speaking, that to me resonates more than anything else, because it goes back to so much of what else you're saying in this book of this. We aren't fighting it. It's that nice voice in your head instead of the voice that many of us were raised. You shouldn't be feeling this, or you should get over it. Or it's like, for me, it's sometimes it's being that nurturing thing to me. It's being like, it's okay. Yes, of course you're feeling that's okay. It's all right. You're good. You're okay. Or you can breathe or whatever it is. But I really,
practicing self-compassion is something we talk about a lot, and it's so important in the whole TLC.
And Maggie always says this in every workshop we do, and it's one of the most brilliant things that I think that the Anxiety Sisters can offer anyone. And she says, when we yell at ourselves, or when we call ourselves names, or when we're difficult and hard on ourselves, all we do is put ourselves in fight or flight. We actually flip the switch back to the stress response if we are not nice to ourselves. So saying things to yourself like, you're going to be okay. This is going to be okay. You're only human. Relax. You're going to be okay. I've got you. Saying those, you are soothing yourself and you are switching yourself into that peaceful response. And if you say, you idiot, why can't you get yourself under control? I can't believe you're doing this again. This is always happening to you. What's wrong with you? When we talk to ourselves that way, it puts you right back in fight or flight.
I had never thought of that, but of course, like even me this morning when I'm like, oh, your whole day is going to be ruined. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. And it's like, you think, I mean, I've certainly been guilty of this. Like sometimes I'm trying to get my kids to do something and, I'm like yelling at them, and my son is like, Mom, just like the startling me is slowing me down, much
like you're freaking me out. Yeah,
it's freaking me out, and that is, as Abbe said, since our own voice is the most important voice in our head, that's even more true when we do it ourselves. When we do it to ourselves, is like we freak ourselves out, basically.
I really appreciate that. Well, and I really appreciate you all taking your time to come on the show and share your message with the Love Your Life show audience. I will have all the links to your book and your podcast. I love the Spin Cycle. I just listened to an episode this morning with Dr. Wendy Suzuki, and He's good. Great. I know. Well, I love all of them. And on Instagram, is there anything, are you launching any programs or anything coming up that you want to tell us about?
We're trying to go back out on the road. We're going to do our first live workshop in Columbus, Ohio on Sunday, the 13th of March.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers
Absolutely crossed.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. This is airing in April, but so you guys will be going on so maybe by then
well, in April we're going to be going out to LA. So we're trying to get back out there, provided that COVID cooperates and that we don't have another variant that shuts us down.
And so so what do? You go out and you have like sort of a meetup with people.
We do these workshops.
Yeah.
We have all different kinds of workshops. So depending what people want, what level we do, we actually we do trainings like we do for CEUs. People did a social work training program in Memphis, and then but we do beginner stuff all the time for people who are new to anxiety. We do stuff for teens. We do stuff for college students.
Oh, it's so exciting. So we want listeners to check out the website and to get the book. This is just it's so full of really everything. I feel like it's one of the most comprehensive guides of anxiety, that it just has not only like the nitty-gritty and the brain science and all that, but then also, you know, things to do, including medication. And I love it. So well done, ladies. Thank you very much.
You've been so generous with us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, we really do.
I'm for real. Thank you.
It's lovely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.